Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Path of Awakening Buddhist Center's course, foundational course. We have been working our way through the first volume of the Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma. It's called The Path of Individual Liberation, and it's basically on the Hinayana teachings. These books, there are 3 volumes, and they are digests, a digest of talks that Trungpa Rinpoche gave over a course of 15 years. Every year he would take anywhere from about 150 to 250 students away to a retreat for 3 months. And during that retreat, they would practice and study. And during the study periods, there was less practice, but still daily practice, of course. During the practice periods, they practiced all day, every day. And during the study periods at night, Trungpa Rinpoche would lecture. And these retreats, they're called Vajradhatu Seminary, was the name given to them, were organized, each retreat, into 3 periods of a month long each, or more or less. And the first month would be devoted to the Hinayana, which literally means lesser vehicle teachings. Trungpa Rinpoche felt that it was more appropriate to call them the foundational vehicle teachings, because they are the foundation, really, of the whole path. And then the second month would be the Mahayana, the greater vehicle teachings. And the third month would be the Vajrayana, or tantric teachings. So we are in the first volume, dealing with the Hinayana teachings, and we're on chapter 9, the painful reality of samsara, and also, well, that's it, chapter 9. That's what we're going to cover tonight. Okay, and I'm going to go first, and then Michael's going to do the second part of this chapter. So he starts out by saying that in order to realize nirvana, which is peace, enlightenment, we first need to realize the nature of samsara. Without that, you can't really understand what nirvana is, because nirvana is the cure, you might say, of samsara, and is seeing the world correctly, whereas nirvana is seeing the world through a lens of distortion. So we need to understand and study both of them. Samsara in particular is what we're going to be talking about tonight, the painful reality of samsara. And it's based on the fundamental ignorance which occurs. And this ignorance is called avidya in Sanskrit, and which literally means not seeing. In Tibetan, it's ma rikpa, which means the same thing. Ma is not, and rikpa is seeing. Seeing what? Seeing reality. Instead, what we do is there arises, you might say, in the middle of this open space of reality, a concretization of something. Basically, it's concretizing the space that we live in, and turning it into a thing. And when we do that, when that is accomplished, when that happens, the existence of this seeming thing, which is only momentary, but it momentarily implies the existence of an observer of that thing. If that's out there, I, the observer, must be here, seeing it. It disappears in an instant, but it contains within it a fundamental anxiety. An anxiety of what? An anxiety of life, that it wants its life to continue, We all feel this anxiety about our lives, our own well-being, the continuance of our lives, our health, our well-being, and so forth. So the birth of this actually non-existent concretization of space, which implies the existence of a perceiver here, has a fundamental anxiety built into it. And that anxiety produces the recreation of that because it wants itself to go on. Once we have this ongoing relationship back and forth, if that's there, the observer, I, later we call it an I, but at this level, it's very primitive, it's just a sense of seeing, is here. And these two things, the concretized space and the observer of the space, are in a relationship. This relationship is characterized in Buddhism by what are called the three poisons. What the idea is that if you have two things in relationship, for any, even just an instant, that relationship is either positive, negative, or neutral. In other words, the other that the I is perceiving is going to be for me, a good thing that I want to pull towards me, or it's going to be threatening against me, in which case I want to push it away from me, or it's going to be indifferent, in which case I don't care, I just stare at it. These are the three poisons of passion, pulling something toward you, aggression, pushing it away from you, and indifference, which is often translated incorrectly as ignorance. It's incorrect because the word in Sanskrit is moha, which literally means indifference. It's not ignorance. Ignorance is an English translation usually applied to avidya, the fundamental mistake of not seeing. You see, not seeing what? Not seeing that this is all open space with flashing colors and lights and all kinds of things going on. The five senses and the mind, everything is arising and passing away momentarily in space. But we concretize it, or it is magically concretized, you might say. It's not even we who concretize it. And once that is done, then there is an observer and an observed. And those two have these three possible relationships, getting closer together, because they're two things, getting further apart, or staying the same distance. These are called the three poisons. And they are at the center of the wheel of life. We've all seen, I hope you've seen, the Bhava Chakra, it's called, the wheel of life. Bhava means becoming, being. Chakra is wheel. And this is literally a wheel when it's depicted symbolically in a picture, and it's held by this demon. He's holding it with his arms, and he's got his fangs biting into the top of it. That demon is Yama. Yama is death. And death holds the wheel of life, because that's what happens when we enter the wheel of life. We're subject to life and death. So he says, unless you relate to passion, aggression, and ignorance as the path, which is what we have to do, we have to begin to acknowledge them instead of just living them, understanding them, working with them, then you won't discover the goal. See, usually we're so caught up in passion, aggression, and indifference that we don't even know we're doing it. It's like we're lost in a dream. We do this all the time in our lives. We just dream and dream and dream. Oh, that person should have said this to me, and oh yeah, I'm going to get a hamburger tomorrow, and oh, I got to remember to pay the bills, and oh gosh, I got to make an appointment with the doctor, and we're just completely caught up in the dream of samsara, which is ruled by these three poisons. So we have to begin to awaken and see what the process is. Otherwise, we're sort of a walking dreamer, unaware that we're dreaming. And we're lost. He says, seeing truth as it is, that's what this process is, the goal, as well as the path. Seeing it is the path, and it's also the goal. Whenever we begin to awaken from the dream, here we are, right here in this present moment. But when we're lost in the dream, we are plodding forward, ruled by all the different things that rule our minds. By discovering the truth of samsara, he says, you are discovering nirvana. In fact, the reality of samsara is equally the reality of nirvana. And what that means is that when we awaken from the dream and see this all happening, we are released. Because we are only enslaved when we're enslaved by the dream. And we do it all the time during our lives. We fall into daydream, into night dream, into dreams of all kinds. We make lists of all the things we have to do, or whatever it may be. So he talks about the wheel of life, the Bhava Chakra. I should have gotten one. If anybody has one, they can share it, screen share it. I do, but I just don't want to go looking for it to. Maybe I'll put it up later when Michael is talking. If you give me a chance, Michael, I can pull one up. I've got one on my computer.
On page 67, there's an illustration in the text.
There he is. It's a black and white, but it's and it's really better when it's in color. Yeah, if you've got page 67, here it is. Bhava Chakra. You can see Yama, his head is up there at the top, and he's holding this wheel that's very complicated with symbol. And we're going to be talking about the wheel of life. This wheel of samsara, really. He says, one experience gives birth to the next within the realm of time, in which each new experience contains the quality of the previous one. A quality is this ongoing momentum. It's like a story that we are living, and that story is unfolding. It's being told, and it's a story that we're telling ourselves. Oh gosh, I've got to remember to pay that bill, or if something bad is going to happen. Oh gosh, I've got to make an appointment with the doctor, or I won't be able to function properly. Oh, whatever. Oh gosh, I've got to call my friend, or he, she will be angry with me. And we go through these imperatives in our lives, the stories which rule us. And within this pattern of chain reactions is a pattern of chain reactions known as the 12 nidanas, the 12 links of the story, because every story has this archetypal construction, this archetypal patterning, which is called the 12 nidanas. And we tell ourselves multiple stories simultaneously and overlapping. They're all sort of functioning at the same time. And then he says, Yama holds the wheel. He is the personification of death. He provides the space and time for birth, death, and survival. Because once we concretize that other, this is the birth of something, that other out there, the space, which implies the existence of me, which is the birth of something. And back and forth it goes, developing into a dramatic story. He provides the space and time for birth, death, and survival, the medium in which the nidanas can be born and die. The nidanas are chain reactions, one leading to the next, to the next, to the next. The story unfolding. The outer ring of the Bhava Chakra, the symbol, portrays the nidanas, as the evolution of suffering, this 12-fold chain. This is called the chain of karma. Karma literally means action, lay in Tibetan. And these actions lead one to the next to the next. They're like a story unfolding with a momentum, an inexorable momentum that we're trapped in. The inner ring is the 6 realms as the perpetuation of suffering, and Michael's going to be talking about these. Each has a Buddha figure signifying the possibility of the cessation of suffering and liberation. In each realm, there is the possibility of enlightenment. Actually, there's not. There is the possibility of moving on to another realm, maybe and eventually the human realm, where we can actually tread the path to enlightenment. You can't really tread the path to enlightenment in the other realms. The other realms, what you can do is evolve into the human realm, which has this possibility. And Michael will talk about that. And the center of the wheel of life portrays the 3 poisons, the origin of suffering. And they're symbolized in the center of the wheel of life by a chicken or a rooster who represents passion, a pig that represents stupidity, and a snake that represents aggression. And they're in the very center of the wheel of life, the chicken, the pig, and the snake. So the first nidana, we're going to go through the 12, and we're going to go through this chain because it repeats over and over and over again in our lives. The first nidana is avidya, which I've already discussed a bit. It's symbolized by a blind grandmother. She's inheriting so much, and she's produced children, and so she's a grandmother. And she's unable to see her own struggle properly and completely. She's intelligent and interested, but in the endless gossip about her grandchildren, he says. She represents the basic intelligence that is undermined because it's transformed into a dualism of I and other, that and this. Seeing solidified space. This is the perception, this produces deception and loneliness. Because as soon as there's that out there and I am here as the perceiver, we're separate. We feel alone. And there's this craving to be unified again, which we pursue in all different kinds of ways. This unification that we would crave. And it's experienced as subtle irritation combined with subtle absorption, and this continues throughout the nidanas, a form of bewilderment. The bewilderment is, how did I wind up separate? What can I do about this? What can I do to unify? I can go have sex. I can go eat something terrific. I can become a success in business or my profession. And we're driven by this fundamental anxiety to unify because we feel that we're separate, but we're not. The whole thing was a mistake. Avidya, not seeing. Not seeing what? Not seeing this open space of reality. That we're in the middle of an endless and infinite cosmos. We think we're going somewhere. We're going from point A to point B in the middle of infinity. So this blind grandmother represents the basic intelligence that has been stymied and misdirected into solidified space and the perceiver of that space, I and other. There's nothing left but deception, because it's been a big mistake, and loneliness. It's experienced as subtle irritation combined with subtle absorption. Absorption in what? Absorption in this problem. The problem of me and what I relate to. And each one of us names it differently. And this continues throughout the nidanas. This is what we carry as we move through samsara. He says it's a samsaric equivalent of samadhi. Samadhi means absorption in reality. This is absorption in I, other. We're constantly moving from one I or their problem to the next. It is the beginning of self-consciousness at this early stage. You feel desolation in the background. The desolation of what? Of your inevitable death, your inevitable loneliness, your inevitable loss. You have an urge to create habitual patterns, to occupy yourself with being lost in the background. So we develop these habits that entertain us and distract us for a moment, for a time. And then they wear out, and we are back in that feeling of anxiety, great or small. Sometimes the anxiety is tiny. Sometimes it's huge. Number 2, the second nidana, is called samskara, which means, it can be translated, it means a lot of different things. It's a collection, it means formation. And the symbol is the potter's wheel, because we're beginning now to create something, like a potter on his wheel and with clay. And this is based on impulsive accumulation. We want to sort of create our little world, and we want to build ourselves up and build up the other out there. Me and my project, me and my profession, me and my possessions, me and my home, me and my beautiful home, me and my partner, me and my whatever it may be. Conceptual mind forming itself into certain patterns, these patterns of I and other beginning to become more and more solid. Karmic creation begins here. Karma means creation or activity, yes. We are constantly creating things. And this is produced by the sense of I-ness and the sense of otherness and the relationship that we develop between the two. We're absorbed continually in this relationship. The potter's wheel is the sense of the obligation, he writes, that we should make our life into something, that we should become, and there, don't we all have this? A poet, a professor, an engineer, a social worker, whatever it may be, a business person, right? A husband, a wife. We have to become something, and we work towards doing that. We're taught to do that by our parents, by the society around us, by everything, by our schools. That sense of obligation or need to create ourselves, to become something solid, is full of anxiety. So the third nidana is symbolized by the monkey. It's vijnana in Sanskrit, which literally means consciousness. And he writes, now that we are in charge of this individual, this I, and playing a quite private game, our games are private. We keep them to ourselves, don't we? We don't talk about them too much. And when we do talk about them, we are careful to talk about them to people who are going to sympathize, resonate, because they've got the same games going or something similar. And the wheel is in motion. A very busy monkey we are now, who says, I'm a monkey, and then defines itself further with bananas, climbing trees, eat what it eats, what it plays with, what it does. And I think that the reason that it's a monkey with the bananas and the trees and all that is because from the point of view of reality, this is really silly and really trivial and really underdeveloped intelligence. And there's a continuous escalation of this samsaric world, this karmic world, this monkey jumping from one branch to another. The fourth samskara then becomes name and form. Nama rupa. Name, nama means name, rupa means form. And it's symbolized by a person in a boat. So having become a professional monkey, jumping from one branch to the next and eating bananas, you give yourself a name and a function, which is a gesture of hope You want a dream that you want to come true. I'm going to become what? A Buddhist teacher. I'm going to become a psychotherapist. I'm going to become a millionaire. I'm going to become a lover, whatever it may be. Naming a person and a thing gives it a home, an image of the person in a home and a house, and you begin to get an image of your environment. You know, a millionaire lives in a big mansion. You know, a lover has all kinds of beautiful things around him or her, and is able to seduce the object of his affection. Verbal and visual concepts are the same. Name and form serves a political or philosophical reinforcement, serves as a political or philosophical reinforcement. So you say, you know, gosh, you know, I'm going to be a really virtuous politician. I'm going to do good works. And you build up a philosophy behind what you're going to do. So we create and adopt the qualities of the king, the queen, the person. This identity that we're going to travel through the cosmos with, through life with. The fifth is the six senses. Sad ayatana. Sad is six. Ayatana means senses or sense bases. The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind all have, these are the organs, and they have their objects. The eye has a visual object, the ear hears a sound, and so forth. The mind has mental objects, thoughts and emotions. So you're building a structure to contain the I-other split, the I-other relationship in all its different manifestations, visual, auditory, tactile, and so forth. It's a secure home for the monkey. Well, the whole situation, he says, is tentative and embryonic because it can fall apart. We worry about our health. We worry about our livelihoods and so forth, our relationships. Number 6, contact, sparsha. That's what sparsha means, contact. And the symbol is a married couple testing to see if the situation works. Contact between masculine and feminine, I and other. These principles complement each other and develop and constitute the development of personality, of foreign relationships. So now we're getting more sophisticated. We're beginning to have like diplomacy, foreign relationships between I and other, all different kinds, business, love, food, whatever it may be. And number 7, feeling, Vedana, it's called Vedana in Sanskrit. And the symbol is an arrow in the eye. Oh, yes. It says, having made contact, you get a rebound or echo from the world. The world outside reacts to you depending on your style of functioning, and this produces all kinds of feelings depending on the situation. A very penetrating and can be painful experience, as if someone had shot an arrow into your eye. You can't pull it out, and you can't leave it in. Very tricky and touchy. So we've got this contact, and now we're having feelings about it, and those feelings can be good, but they always turn into pain, don't they? Sooner or later. The arrow in the eye is the first real perception of this and that, the world outside. It is a message not of death, but of life, feeling alive, really living in the world, you might say. Ah, it's fantastic to be alive, but there is still this arrow in your eye. It's fantastic to be alive, but there's this feeling of pain. What a beautiful day, and we feel this vague sense of sorrow about the beauty that we're witnessing. Number 8 is craving, which is called Trishna, T-R-S-N-A in Sanskrit, Trishna. And it's symbolized by drinking milk and honey. He says it's more like eating ice cream or rice pudding because there's this constant feeling of sweet, of pleasure. You're consuming. You want to consume pleasure. He says milk and honey just go into you without even inviting them. It is instant rather than deliberate. There's no intellectualization at all. Craving just happens to you, this Trishna. He says, and it happens to you constantly. Then impulse takes over and leads you to. Now, in terms of, this is a very key point, the point of craving, Trishna. This chain can't be broken except in one place. This is it. When you feel craving and you're beginning to going to act on that, which is the next nidana, this is the place where you can break the chain, the karmic chain, by not going into action, instead becoming aware. And this will be talked about later. Otherwise, this karmic chain just unfolds relentlessly, again and again. So the ninth nidana, which is the one that if you don't break the chain there, and most of the time we do not. The ninth one is called grasping, and the symbol is gathering fruit. The word is upadana in Sanskrit. He says you have a courtship with the world. You begin to regard life as a bit of a joke. At the same time, it is enormously fun. Your life is so good, you are falling in love with it. There is a tendency to do whatever you feel like doing. That's the positive spin. The negative spin is that you're frightened, you're unhappy, and so you grasp. You grasp in an attempt to alleviate that pain. And this propels you into the next nidana. See, at this point, it's all inevitable. You can't stop it. You're just caught in the chain. And the next one is called bhava, becoming, bhava in Sanskrit. And the symbol of it is copulation. Now he says at this point there is an inevitable tendency to feel that someone else could possibly share this experience, someone else to relate to. That loneliness and longing for companionship, we all have this, leads us to the next nidana, or bhava, becoming, copulation. We want a partner. We want someone to share this with, to reinforce the feeling that we're not alone. He says, taking life more seriously, making love. We're stuck with one apple, one partner, at least for the moment, with an obligation to finish it, to have that pleasure. If it's an apple that's good and crunchy, biteable, making love with excitement and discomfort. You develop a tremendous awareness of things, a heightened quality of vision, and other sense perceptions. So we're copulating. Number 11 is birth, and the symbol is a woman in childbirth. And you want evidence of yourself being in union, of copulating. And the evidence is being a father or a mother. Provide legitimacy. Really solidify the union, the feeling that you're not alone. He says, birth is a fact of life. It is the truth. Cause and effect are actually happening. Truth is taking place. Having given birth to something, a feeling of power begins to develop. You're responsible for the whole thing. You're stuck with it. You can't deny it. And you're really stuck in it now, the family. But the exuberance of youth, he writes, or says, automatically leads to the crescendo of old age. Having created all this, inevitably it starts to deteriorate and pass away, die. This is jaramarana in Sanskrit. You experience decay, sickness, and dying. Finally, birth and death become very close to one another. You think, and boy, do some of us think this, you think, my life went by so fast. Is it true or is it just a joke? And it's so true. I mean, I'm 78 years old. It was just a finger snap ago that I was 25, coming to Boulder, where I'm living now, to practice Buddhism. He says, death, this old age and death, includes the physically overpowering situation of having too many things to manage. How many of us experience that? The many objects and relationships you have created become the inspiration for the charnel ground. The charnel ground is the graveyard. In Indian culture, when you die, the best thing is if your body can be cremated on the banks of the Ganges, preferably at Bodh Gaya, not at Bodh Gaya, excuse me, at Varanasi. This is the classic thing. And if you go to Varanasi, if you ever go there, you can get up early in the morning, if you need a guide, to take you down to the river where the ghats are. The ghats are terraces that go down right to the water. And the roads down to the terraces are lined. There are these paths, these little narrow streets, tiny streets, just room for you to go down this path on cobblestones. And on either side, there are beggars. And your guide will give you a big bag of paisa pieces. Paisa are a tenth of a penny. And you hand them out to the beggars as you go down. And when you get to the ghats, there are thousands, maybe 1 million people, because the ghats stretch for a mile up and down the banks of the Ganges. And people are going down because the holy thing to do is to go down to the ghats and bathe. And people are bathing. They're brushing their teeth. They're doing yoga on the steps. They're doing every damn thing. And there are probably, I mean, the day that I went down, I would guess, just guess, there may be 1 million people. And my guide got me a boat, a punt, with a guy to row us out. And we rowed out into the river to look back at everybody coming down to bathe. And meanwhile, what's happening is that upriver, just upriver of where these ghats is a charnel ground. And bodies are being burned. And the ashes are being thrown into the river. And they're floating down. And that's what people are bathing in, this ashy water with the ashes of bodies, human bodies. Because the holiest thing to do is to have your body burned on the bank. This is if you're Hindu, on the banks of the Ganges, and your ashes carried down. This river, the Ganges, springs from Shiva's brow on Mount Kailash. He lives at the top of Mount Kailash, and the river springs from Shiva's brow. Shiva is the god of destruction and death. And so all these people are bathing in this water, which is full of ashes coming down, and the occasional corpse that you see floating down the river as well. These are he says, so you have the inspiration for the charnel ground. The charnel ground, see, if you can't afford to have your body burned on the banks of the Ganges, or if your family can't afford it, then your body will be just taken out to what is called a charnel ground. A charnel ground is a place, and there are many of them around India, where bodies are dumped and left there for animals to eat. And the animals come and eat these bodies. So, pretty macabre, huh? So I'm going to stop there, but I think that this is a marvelous picture in this chapter of this sense of how I complicates, develops, and we carry it through life with an underlying sense of anxiety. The anxiety is because I doesn't really exist, and we have to keep proving it by complicating and developing relationship with other. And that relationship takes so many forms. I'm going to stop and turn it over to Michael.
Thank you. So I'd say just a couple of things to link together what we studied in regard to karma and the nidanas with the 6 realms. Said that only a realized Buddha fully understands karma, and I think that's certainly true when we think about the kind of random and coincidental things that happen in our lives, starting with who we're born to, that we'll never understand. But in an immediate sense, karma makes a lot of sense and can even be understood with, in the terms of contemporary psychology, that it has a lot to do with how we habituate ourselves to situations, how we form habits. That the more we do something, the easier it is to do it again. The more we see things in certain ways, the more likely we are to see those things in the same ways in the future. And so can think of karma, at least on one level, as the process by which we project onto things based on our past, starting with the very vivid image of the blind grandmother, as well as the kinds of things we choose to identify with or not identify with, the things that we say as me or not me in the world, and how we are conditioned by our past to repeat patterns in terms of our perceptions and our actions if we are not aware. And so a study of karma and the nidanas, if we really look at it not as something external, but in terms of how we live our lives, provides a lot of motivation for the practice of meditation, because that's the only way to wake up and to begin to work our way out of just acting on ignorance and acting out of just simply repeating our past. Another thing that we would get from the study of karma is that basically who we think we are, the world that we think we're in, is constructed from moment to moment. And it's a construction that's constantly changing. If any one of us, I think, were to think back to what we were doing 3 or 4 hours ago, we were thinking about very different things, feeling very different things, doing very different things. So from moment to moment, our experience of ourselves, our experience of the world is a construction that we take to be fully real, a dream, like John says, or Trungpa Rinpoche uses the word hallucination. That's obviously based on certain things, but that altogether is a construction. And so it's useful to study and think about karma as well as the 6 realms, because as we come to understand these things, first of all, it loosens some of our fixation on taking them to be real. Trungpa Rinpoche says at the end of this chapter that we take things too seriously. And by that, I think that's what he means, that we take them to be real, solid, true, in a way that they're not. It helps to sharpen our prajna, our intelligence, by studying these things, and helps us to see more clearly. So if karma describes how we construct a view of ourselves and a view of the world, then the next ring, the next ring in the wheel of life is actually what we construct, which is the 6 realms. So that's the inner ring. And as Trungpa Rinpoche says, the inner ring shows how the confused mind finds different styles of occupation, which are called realms. And it's exactly that, occupation. It's, again, something that we create, become absorbed in, that we identify with. And all of that is what's described in the process of developing karma through the nidanas. Again, what we project, what we identify with, what we take to be real, how we perceive things, all of that leads to our finding ourselves in one of the 6 realms, beginning again with ignorance. And we can think of the realms in different ways. Trungpa Rinpoche presented them often as psychological states, and we can certainly understand the realms, I think, in terms of different psychological states that we find ourselves in, that we find other people in. We can understand them also as literal places that beings are born into. And then we can see it in terms of just patterns that people have in their lives. That sometimes people live their lives predominantly in one realm. He makes the point that there's no starting point and no definite order to the realms. In other words, it's possible to move from one realm to another in any order. But the reality is, because of habitual patterns, a lot of times we do have habitual ways that each one of us proceeds through the realms. But there's nothing that except our habitual patterns that makes that true. So it's possible, in other words, it's possible to go from any one realm to any other realm, depending on causes and conditions at any time. He begins in this chapter talking about the realms in terms of what are called the three higher realms: the human realm, the jealous god or asura realm, and the god realm. And just to say a little bit about realms, you could think of these essentially as that each realm has kind of a predominant emotional tone. It doesn't mean that there aren't other emotions as well. And it has a particular storyline or a particular theme to it that describes some kind of a relationship of I and other. Each realm has its particular characteristic struggles as a result of that notion of I and other, which again is born out of, as John said, frozen space to begin with. So that it's not that the I or other exists in any real permanent sense, which is one reason why we can go from realm to realm. But in the moment, when we're caught up in a realm, when we're absorbed, when we're really identifying with this is me, this is how the world is, it can seem quite real and quite solid. So again, if karma describes how we construct the realms, the 6 realms actually describe what it is that we construct. You can think of it that way. And Trungpa Rinpoche begins in this chapter by talking about the human realm, which is the realm that we're all in. And he says that it's the realm, the land, it's sometimes called the land of karma because human beings can perceive and work with karmic force. And the reason for this is significant. The basic idea is that the intensity of the struggle, the intensity of the emotionality, the intensity of the drama, the seeming solidness of the reality of the other 5 realms is so intense that, as he says, that change can only happen when the karmic force of the hallucination wears out. Whereas in the human realm, it's possible to experience gaps. The basic theme or emotion, you could say, of the human realm relates to passion and desire. And this can be passion, desire for anything. If you think of all the people we know in our lives, some people passion, desire for relationship, for love, for sex. There are people who passion, desire for intellectual pursuits, people passion and desire for artistic pursuits. Money, cars, travel, the list is endless in terms of what kinds of things humans can desire. And again, it's each person's individual karma, what drives them. But the point that Trungpa Rinpoche makes is the suffering in this realm, in the human realm, is there's a constant edge of dissatisfaction. There's a constant edge of hoping for something more, or finding that things don't quite work out. There's a possibility, if not a reality, of disappointment. There's the inevitability that whatever it is that we collect, we attract to ourselves, and our passion or desire changes in some way, is impermanent, so that at some point it wears out. And in fact, that's when we can begin to realize, as he says, the uselessness of struggling. The way he words it is the constant search for pleasure and its failure pushes the inquisitive intelligence of the human realm into neurosis, again, obsession, fixation of all kinds. But karmic coincidences bring about the possibility of realizing the uselessness of struggling. In other words, we can begin to see through or begin to see the uselessness of the constant struggling. It doesn't mean that there aren't temporary satisfactions. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't necessarily pursue those. But as we come to practice, we come to realize that that attachment and fixation actually create a great deal of suffering, and that in fact, the more we're able to let go of the sense of struggle and just appreciate things in the moment for what they are, that there's a more kind of enduring satisfaction that might come out of that. But the main point is, in the human realm, we can begin to see through the struggle of the realm, the passion, desire. We begin to see through the relentless struggle, and in fact can do something else. And this is where the practice of meditation comes in, where we allow ourselves to settle, slow down, and actually begin to see things as they are, rather than projecting as we do in our desires, in our passion, imagining that things will bring a kind of satisfaction that they won't, or a lasting satisfaction that they won't. And again, it doesn't mean that we don't pursue things that we're interested in, but we maybe do so with a different point of view, with less attachment, less drive, less intensity, and more awareness of the reality of things. And again, the whole struggle in the human realm is all the hope and fear that comes with relating to passion and desire, all the conflicting emotions that come with looking for these kinds of satisfactions. So that's the human realm. And again, there are 8 billion people, I think, something like that in the world. So there are a lot of different ways in which the human realm can be expressed. But in its essence, that's what we mean by the human realm. The next realm that he talks about is a jealous god, or asura realm. These are entities, beings that are powerful and somewhat accomplished, but at the same time, there's a real competitive drive. It's, as he says, there's the ambition of gaining victory, the fear of losing a battle. So as a result of that, there's irritation, that there's a constant competitive drive, a desire to be the best, to have the best, to win, to get the best. And at the same time, there's the fear of losing. So with the jealous God realm, there's a constant, the emotions that are evoked in this realm involve envy, as well as mistrust or paranoia, the fear that somebody else is getting ahead in some way. You want what other people might have. And I think John's given the example before of people that, who were driven businessmen in New York, who really seem to be caught up in this jealous God mentality of having to compete, having to win, tremendously fearful of loss, tremendously mistrustful, envious, and being driven by these emotions. So there's a great deal of suffering in this realm because of, again, the desire, the competitiveness, the mistrustfulness, the combativeness, the aggression in this realm. The highest realm in terms of the 6 realms is the God realm. And Trungpa Rinpoche describes this as the product of self-indulgence and ideal pleasure. But the basic idea of the God realm is that it's a state of mind that's fixated on maintaining pleasure, maintaining a sense of bliss, a sense of just intensity of pleasure. And as a realm, it is not painful necessarily at the time, because again, there's this absorption in pleasure. But when the realm, because it's created, because it involves states of mind that are created through meditation or through various practices, in a more earthy way, perhaps through substance abuse, when you crash, when you come out of this realm, it's tremendously painful. It's said in the teachings that there's nothing more painful than a god about to die, because first of all, just the contrast between pain and pleasure, but also this tremendous sense of loss. But he says the most important thing is the realm of the gods is regarded as an impermanent state because it's based on ego's game of maintenance, in which, in terms of concentration practice or meditation practice, meditation is seen as separate from your own being. So basically, it's a realm where a person or being, a God realm being, is totally absorbed in a state of mind that in the moment might be pleasurable, but there's always an edge of effort. There's always an edge of struggle and striving. And again, the difficulty is that you can maintain a high for only so long before there's a crash. And again, the relationship to other is totally based on maintaining this high, maintaining some state of bliss. It's a realm that's actually characterized by ignorance, because you're not really, it's a realm in which God realm is not dealing with things as they are, but things as they're projected to be, as you hope that they could be. And again, the real pain in the God realm comes when things inevitably come apart, which they do. The realm that's considered the three lower realms below the human realm, usually there's a hierarchy from God to jealous God to human to animal realm. The animal realm is characterized by ignorance or stupidity, is the emotional theme. But the basic idea, he says, is more one of laziness than dullness. But the basic idea is that in the animal realm, animals work by instinct. They work by pattern. That they work by, and that there's as he says, there's a refusal to venture onto new ground. That there's a tendency to cling to the familiar and to fight and to try to stay with one familiar situation after the other. It's a realm that in which there's very little openness. Again, it can be like a real tunnel vision kind of a realm. And in terms of how this might manifest for people, it's where people just are numb themselves out and just go from situation to situation without much appreciation of the world around them, and just get absorbed in television. Again, substance abuse would be a possibility. Just different kinds of things where there's a constant attempt to maintain a sense of comfort. It's not blissful like the God realm is, but they are related in the sense of both being connected with ignorance. And again, there's a real sense in the animal realm of being stuck in habitual patterns, of doing things today because that's how it was done yesterday, and that tomorrow will look exactly the same. There's a real sense of again, constant familiarity and finding a comfort in familiarity and an unwillingness to be curious or to try new things. That's an animal realm existence. The hungry ghost realm is one that's characterized by overwhelming desire, overwhelming passion, actually. It's a constant sense of grasping and hunger and neediness. There's a constant sense that in terms of I and other, that whatever is good is somewhere out there, and that there's a constant desire to want to consume, to take in, to possess, to, in its more aggressive form, control, because of this desire to take in from the outside what's felt to be lacking. As he says, the hungry ghost realm is an intense state of grasping in the midst of continual, overwhelming poverty. And it's when you begin to see, particularly with the hungry ghost realm, although maybe it was clear in some of the others, exactly what he means when he said that the intensity of the struggle in the realm and the intensity of the emotionality is so great that there's no openness, there's no gap. There's just, again, with the hungry ghost realm, a constant need, constant dependency, a constant trying to take in and consume. And he says the definition of hunger in this case is the fear of letting go. It's the wanting itself that actually creates the pain in this realm, and it's relentless. It's the in terms of human existence, it's one of the realms that, or one of the experiences you might have, inferiority, depression, intense neediness, and again, the part of the misperception in this realm is that whatever is seen as good is seen to be outside and need to be taken in. And then we have the hell realm, which is the lower realm. And again, there are, if you actually were to study this in detail, there are different types of hells that kind of describe different kinds of hellish experiences. But it's a state of mind that's characterized by extreme aggression as well as fear. And the relationship with other is, there's a sense of being intense irritation with other, as well as fear, a sense of threat in regard to other. So that's extreme aggression. And that he says this creates a force of energy, and it creates an overall environment of aggression where the whole world feels hot, unbearable, intense. And if we think of situations where we ourselves might have become intensely angry, or where we know other people, then this is a hell realm experience. It's, again, an experience of significant aggression and irritation and painful relations, a sense of threat, fear in regard to other. The pain in this realm is said to be constant, And even the attempt to escape just intensifies the sense of imprisonment. The more one tries to get out of it, the more solid the walls seem to be, the hotter the fire seems to be. And then again, there are different types of hell. There are also frozen hells where we become, or a person might become, so shut down and so internally rageful that they don't relate to the world at all. They're completely cut off, completely isolate themselves from the rest of the world in frozen anger. But again, the basic idea is that the hell realm is characterized by the experience of aggression in terms of the three poisons, and that again, it's a realm that's highly reactive. And as with the other realms, but particularly with this realm, it's a realm that can be really difficult to work with. That at times, as Trungpa Rinpoche says, we have to wait for the karmic force of the hallucination to wear off, to wait for the energy to dissipate, which eventually it does. So that's the inner ring. And then the center of the wheel we talked about a little bit already in terms of the three kleshas: passion, aggression, and ignorance. That these are kind of the driving force, the emotion that drive us all together in terms of how we relate to other and how we perceive ourselves. And you can see that the different realms have different characteristics of passion, aggression, and ignorance. But the basic idea of passion, aggression, and ignorance is that they do involve emotion, but they really go beyond that. The idea of a klesha is it really shapes how we see the world. That, for instance, if we're really, really passionate about something, we think of it as all good, and we ignore or we downplay anything that we might see as negative about it. We feel we can't live without it. We have to draw it in. Again, it depends to what extent our experience of passion is a human realm experience of passion versus a hungry ghost realm of passion, how desperate we become and how much we strive. And with aggression, it's again, same thing with aggression, that when we become aggressive, it shapes literally how we see how we see the rest of the world. We tend to, if we're really aggressive, we only see the negative. We want to destroy, eliminate it, remove it completely. And again, depending on the intensity of the aggression, we might have experienced that in a jealous God realm kind of a way, or a hell realm kind of a way. And then ignorance, again, is characterized mainly by absorption and an attempt to maintain something while holding off the world, either through a God realm experience of pleasure and bliss, or animal realm, just seeking some kind of comfort in familiarity and not being challenged or not being open to the world around us. So the chapter ends with some statements about the deadly seriousness of samsara. And again, he starts this off by saying that the problem is we take these things too seriously. By which, again, I think what he really means is that we take what we perceive, these hallucinations, these constructions, to be more real than they are. And that the experience of death that he talks about really reflects the impermanence of everything that we experience, that everything changes. And that the more we're able to relate with, when we ignore the experience of death, then we end up recreating over and over again. We could say that by not relating to the experience of death, by relating to the experience of the ending of things, we don't allow a gap. We don't allow ourselves to just settle in the moment, which is what we practice in meditation practice. So that we just jump from realm to realm to realm, nidana to nidana to nidana. And this, we can perpetuate that forever by ignoring the ending of things, by ignoring the process of death, as he says. And he says a little bit about the sense of continuity in life, which he says has nothing to do with the idea that we exist. The continuity is simply all these changes that take place. Action or karma is continuous. And as long as we live that way, we die that way and are born that way. The truth of death is the truth of life. So death is not regarded as an escape or an ending of our life, but death is the beginning of another birth, and that process takes place constantly. And so again, so long as we don't take advantage of what is available to us as human beings, which is that ability to begin to see through or let go or to allow some gap, which we work with primarily through meditation practice. But also, we can be furthered along by our study. We come to see that these realms are fictitious, that they're constructed. They make a lot of sense when we're caught up in the logic and the emotion of them. But then afterwards, sometimes we even say to ourselves, what was I thinking? What happened to me? And more as we have these experiences, we begin to be able to let go, have a little bit of distance, maybe not identify quite as much. And this allows us to open up and begin to work ourselves free, which is the whole point of the path of individual liberation. So I'll stop there, and I guess we have some time for discussion.
You did a great job explaining those realms. And I think that, and I've read this before and experienced it too, that we go in and out of the realms. Mm-hmm. Just like, I don't know, almost without knowing.
I think that's exactly the point. And it's just beginning to see that as significant.
Right. And like John said, that one chain where to break the cycle, you have to notice it. Yeah. When there's attachment, I guess, or that's before the grasping, whatever that chain is before the grasping chain, mm-hmm. is if you notice it, mm-hmm. That's where you can get free.
Yeah. That was craving. You begin to realize.
Craving. Okay. Craving.
Not just
I'll start with the ice cream. Yeah. If I crave ice cream, I'll catch it.
Enjoy ice cream, but
I'm kidding.
But we can enjoy ice cream with some mindfulness.
Right.
We're so quick to consume, we don't even really taste what we're eating.
Yeah. And another thing too, if you don't mind me continuing, we can have goals and desires and aspirations, and like that prayer, one of the phrases in the prayers earlier was that, I don't know, may you receive your mind's desire, or something about that, right? Something about your mind. Mm-hmm. So
whatever mind desires, yes.
Yeah, what your mind desires. So desire in itself isn't the issue. It's when it goes beyond that and it goes to craving and grasping, and then the intent for it, right? I can want to have my own business, right? Mm-hmm. But if my own business, me wanting my own business, if the intent is to, I don't know, to make a name for myself or something like that, that would take me into probably some samsara, because my intention isn't pure, my reasoning, right? So I mean, we can have desires, but it's when it gets beyond this particular maybe intensity, or involves our emotions too much, and that goes into craving and grasping, correct? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong there.
It's grasping and attachment that become a problem. But I think the main thing is just, we have desires. We're human beings. These human beings that's one of the hallmarks of the human realm. It's just that we can experience desire with mindfulness and awareness. And so we're able to relate to things in a more skillful way, hopefully in a way that doesn't create harm to ourselves and others. The problem is when desire leads to, because we get caught up in an illusion and take things to be things that they're not, then we get ourselves, in all kinds of trouble. But the point isn't to just, do nothing. That's not the point.
Right.
Just to come to understand, come to see desire, come to understand something about, as he says, the uselessness of struggling. So we can do things, but we're realistic about what we're doing. in terms of what it's going to do and what we're going to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that point, because on the one hand, I mean, I know I tend to think globally sometimes and not very subtly. So, but you know, because on the one hand, it can, all the 12 nidanas and the realms can all sound like this kind of negative morass. But on the other hand, I think of like the readings in Shambhala, where I don't know what chapter it is, but in the book, where he kind of talks about an appreciation of like the beauty, like somewhere he talks about like what went into developing arches to hold up ceilings, and how develop an appreciation for the creativity that people before us came upon to develop, you know, works of architecture, and I don't know, I guess these different dharmas, agriculture, and all different things. So it seems like on Carolyn's point, there's a way to relate to these manifestations in a way that is with an appreciation, versus just looking at it all as like something to be denigrated or something, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that all these activities can be done sanely and neurotically. You know, we could be sane business people and neurotic business people. Trungpa Rinpoche encouraged all of his students, you know, we were all hippies back in those days, and he encouraged everybody to get married, have kids, start businesses, and he encouraged us. We formed in Boulder what was called, jokingly, the Better Boulder Buddhist Business Bureau. Yeah. And we had meetings with him about, you know, how to conduct business in a dharmic way. And, you know, it was without aggression, creativity, appreciation. Yeah.
I've got a question here. Over the years, I've heard, you know, in this particular topic, desire and attachment kind of get conflated. And it's kind of seemed to me that the problem is attachment, not desire. Do you know what I'm getting at? I mean,
I think there's a difference between desire and appreciation. Appreciation for the qualities of things. But with desire, at least in this context, I don't know, Michael, I think it's used in the sense of ego aggrandizement, that I desire something, I want to pull it to me to make me more than, you know, than I have been. And aggression, you know, the way the word is used is I want to push something away from me because it threatens my existence. And that this idea of my existence that we protect and augment is problematic.
Yeah, my point here is with desire and attachment. So, you know, I desire to sit in the sun. You know, that seems like a pretty normal desire, you know, and a host of, you know, normal desires. I desire food in the morning, right? But it's the attachment to that seems to be the problematic issue, in the sense that I want food in the morning, you know, okay, I've had enough.
Then you're going to derive some kind of pleasure, some ego gratification from it. I mean, for instance, sitting in the sun, Rinpoche used to mock us who went away to beaches, you know, to the ocean to sit on the beach. He called it lying in the dirt. And who knows? I think it's just a matter of this idea of reinforcing this false sense of self. And what all this is saying is that the self, this I, that we want to buttress and build, doesn't actually exist at all, and that our attachment to it and our constant efforts to make it stronger, more substantial, are not only futile because it doesn't exist, but they're the source of endless woe, one way or the other, in small ways or in big ways, and inflicted on both us and others. And so it's asking us to wake up from this dream of I and other, and that we still might be business people. We might have a business, like Caroline was saying, but we might do it in a different way, without the paranoia of failure and loss.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, because I think we can be attached to our desires, right? So I like the analogy of the beach, right? I'm going to say, instead of being on the dirt, I'm going to say connecting to nature. Okay.
Okay.
I like to connect to nature, but I think we can see attachment when we go to the beach, right? Because you see people there having a good time. They're sunning. They may be semi-tanned, and then you've got the ones that are so dark, you know that woman or that man is out in the sun probably every month of the season, right? They have to be tanned all the time, otherwise, oh, I don't look good if I'm not tanned. Or the woman that will never take her makeup off. Okay, I met a woman that sleeps in her makeup. She never want to let her husband see her without makeup. She was petrified. So I think she was like attached to this image, and probably an aversion to her natural self, right? So I think we can have desires, but we certainly see extremes, and I think the extremes are where there's the craving and the grasping.
Mhm.
That's just my observation.
Could I add something? I don't know. There's not raising hand functions in this
Yeah, go
meeting,
ahead.
so I was just gonna, yeah. Um, Thinking about myself, I mean, I know like one of Chogyam Trungpa's like foremost books is Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, and he talks a lot about our attachment to not being attached to things. And I'm kind of laughing at myself because I mean, I don't know, like I like food and I have a girlfriend and I'm in classes and I'm trying to get a job and all that, but like what would really keep me awake at night is the idea of like having all these attachments. Or I feel like that's like my deepest attachment is to like do all these attachments. I mean, if you look at my bank account, you know what I'm spending all my money on? Dharma books. Like I have a whole bunch of books back there. Like that's what I'm wasting my money on. Not wasting, but you know. So I don't even know if there was a question in there. That's my thought.
Thank you, Kyle.
Well, I think that's one of the challenges of the human realm is understanding what's in relationship to desire.
Yeah.
Miriam?
Wouldn't you say, though, that the desire to realize oneself, or to achieve the ultimate of sort of being on the path, that search for, I'm trying to find the right word for this, but wouldn't you say that desire is the most important, if not the only desire that matters? ultimately?
And
For me, I'd say yes.
and ultimately, it's a desire that has to be given up. Might be the last one. In another context, Trump Rinpoche called about, he said, cynicism is necessary. That cynics make good Buddhists. I don't believe in that. He said, but ultimately, cynicism is a knife that cuts itself. You can't cling to that either. You know, you have to come back to awareness of this, giving up all strategies, and come to this appreciation of life as it unfolds in this present moment. Without strategy.
Thank
and
you.
and I would think that appreciating life in that present moment means that you ultimately give up all attachment and all desire, that all of that, because if you're in the present moment, there's nothing else but that. There's nothing to desire.
But there could be appreciation. Appreciation for the vividness of our experience. Yeah.
I'm remembering a question and answer between not Trungpa Rinpoche, but one of Trungpa Rinpoche's students who was presenting and a participant. Sometimes it's said that the second noble truth relates to desire as the origin of suffering. But then if you start thinking about, well, I want to be without desire, that's a desire too. There's no way out. As long as you're imagining. As long as you're imagining something different other than where we are.
Well, I think about, one of the things I think about, like the idea of starting a business was an example that's been brought up a few times. And, you know, I know Chicken Trungpa, like in Shambhala book and maybe in other writings or talks, he talks about territoriality and, you know, and how that can be problematic. I mean, somehow it seems to me that like somehow we're being called to be skillful. Like if you're running a business, almost by definition, it seems like there's an implicit territoriality there. But how do you relate with that in such a way that it doesn't become a problem, either for yourself or other people? You know, like what's the skillful relationship? You know, and I'm not sure, but I think part of it is, one of the clues is to not take it too seriously. Like during the realms, you were talking about, Michael, about how there can be like almost an aggression realm of like seeing others as a threat and automatically being hostile. Like that's probably not relating with space or territory in a skillful way.
Yeah, and it's probably not a place you'd want to go very often to deal with that person's business. So from a business point of view, that's not a great way to relate. You always see your customers as enemies and threats.
Yeah.
You have to have a great monopoly to be able to pull that one off. They're going to go somewhere else.
You know, I was in business for 22 years. And there were times when we thought we were going to go under. I actually hired a bankruptcy attorney at one point because we thought we were going to go bankrupt, but we didn't. And we succeeded, and business was a success in the end. And we sold it, and we employed 150 people when we sold it. And the constant emphasis that Trungpa Rinpoche made was, you can create a beautiful society of appreciation of life and people. And this can be the foundation of a good business. I'm not saying that we achieve that, in any kind of perfect way. But I know this, that after we sold the company that acquired it was not turned out. We didn't know, but they put a guy in charge of it who was not a nice guy. And some people left, quite a few. But even among the people who left and the ones who stayed, they formed a club and they met together for years after the company, and then the company eventually was absorbed into other companies, and they still met, some of those people, because they formed friendships and meaningful relationships. And so you can do it, it happens. I'm not saying, it was a struggle. I was very concerned with the survival of the company. And there were times when we thought it wouldn't survive, like that time we actually hired this bankruptcy attorney. Mm-hmm. So, life and death. But throughout, Trungpa Rinpoche encouraged us to create a beautiful and enlightened society. That's what Shambhala teachings are all about, if you read the Shambhala book. Enlightened society. That's the whole emphasis of Shambhala. Buddhism is much more about the liberation of the individual, achieving enlightenment like a Buddha. But Shambhala was about creating an enlightened society in which people got enlightened, but they worked together beautifully to create a beautiful world. That's what Shambhala was about. It still is. Should be.
I had one last thought about sitting in the sun. And I think maybe it's another way of saying attachment, but I think sometimes the problem comes in with what level of how much expectation and demand we bring into situations, that we things have to be a certain way as opposed to just being open to how things actually are. And that's where one of the ways, at least, in which desire can go awry.
Well, I just realized it's time. So we should end. I'm going to put the closing chants up. We can all, I'm going to mute all, and we can do the closing chants. And I invite you all to come to the discussion group next Wednesday and discuss anything and everything that we were discussing.
I'm sitting every morning and evening.
Right.
We will end by chanting the prayer for peace and by dedicating the merit generated through our practice to the benefit of all sentient beings.
And Philip, I'm going to mute all. So unmute yourself, please.
By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times, and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world. And may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rignant's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, John and Michael.